Football, basketball, winter sports, cold weather hereabouts. Anyone for tennis? This is the story of a remarkable young tennis player, one of the best in the country, one of the best in the world, who got there despite a series of catastrophes that almost killed him. It is also a classic, if improbable, story about the power of positive thinking. 2 years ago, James Blake was hot. Hot on the court, where his blistering speed had him racing up the rankings. Bring it on, bring it on. And hot off the court, where People magazine named him the world's sexiest athlete. He'd signed a modeling contract, had spreads in GQ and Teen Vogue. On buses and billboards, he appeared larger than life. And then his life almost ended. Tennis court net posts are made of solid steel. And in Italy early last year, James was racing toward the net to return a drop shot when he lost his balance and slammed head first into a steel net post. The impact broke his neck.
It didn't move at all. It didn't budge, and I did.
His coach, Brian Barker, saw it happen.
He was running full blast. His foot catches, and he goes head first into the net post as hard as you could hit. There's a loud sound. He goes down hard. He's laying on the ground, and my heart sank. I was scared to death. I looked at him, and I gave him kind of a dumb question. I said, "Are you okay?" And he just whispered, I can't breathe.
He'd knocked the wind out of himself and had broken his neck, but to hear James tell it?
I was unbelievably lucky. As soon as I kind of felt myself airborne, I turned my head a little to the side and hit my neck instead of hitting straight on my head. And
right.
I was unbelievably lucky because the doctor said with as hard as I hit it, if it had hit the top of my head, I probably would never be walking again.
So you're there on the clay in Rome, and you're thinking, what?
Just every thought went through my mind. Could this be a broken neck? Could I have just ended my tennis career? Have I played my last match? 2 days after the accident, you were transferred to another hospital for a CAT scan? Yeah.
Still had your tennis clothes on, and you said, I quote you, "I was still covered in clay. I stunk. It was a low point in my life. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I knew I was seriously hurt, but I also knew that I looked ridiculous. So I decided to laugh?"
Yeah, I was so fortunate. My coach, Brian Barker, was there, and he said, "We got two options. We can laugh about this or we can cry about this." And I immediately said, "Let's laugh. Let's just kind of joke about it and hope that everything turns out all right. But if it doesn't, I got to find a way to still be happy with it."
And he said, "We might as well laugh." He said, "You know, it's pretty funny that a tennis player my level, with his coach standing right in front of him, could run and go head first into a net post." He's like, "There's going to be something funny about this when we look back." He said, "So right now we'll just kind of suck it up and make the best of it."
Against the advice of his Italian doctors, he flew back to his home in Connecticut near his parents' house. His neck was in a brace. He was in horrific pain. But leave it to James to find that silver lining. Now you say that breaking your neck was the, quote, luckiest thing that ever happened to you?
Yeah, for last year, it was definitely the best thing that happened to me. It ended up being the last 6 weeks of my father's life, so I got to be here to spend a lot of time with him.
His dad, Tom Blake, had been a sales manager at 3M. But now, at just age 57, he was losing his life to stomach cancer. Did you know how ill he was at the time?
I really didn't know the extent of it. He was an extremely proud man, and that's why I'm so lucky that I did hurt myself the way I did, because I'm sure he wouldn't have told me how bad it was becoming and how serious it was. My plan was to be over in Europe that whole time, and so I might not have made it home at all. And I'm lucky I came home, and I learned a lot more about life and just about my dad and about everything.
His father first got him interested in tennis. Tom and Betty Blake met on a tennis court and took James and his older brother Thomas with them whenever they played.
I think they were too cheap to pay for babysitters, so they brought us up to the courts. As soon as they were done, they would toss us a few balls, and we just loved it right away.
James would come out and stand on the service line, and I'd stand on the other service line, and we'd hit balls back and forth.
At the age of 3?
He was a little under 3, and he would never miss. He would just keep going and going and going.
But young James developed a terrible temper, and he became notorious for smashing his racket after a bad shot. Growing up, I understand you were a fat pain in the back.
I was. When I was on the tennis court, you could really see it. Throwing rackets, whining, temper tantrums. And
James says he just may have had the wrong role models.
Answer my question! I can't believe this!
The #1 player in the world was probably John McEnroe at the time, and I had a not-so-great example to look up to. And I finally got a sportsmanship award when I was 17, and my mom couldn't believe it.
Had you lost that day?
No, I'd won the tournament, so I had 2 trophies. And she said, "What's the other one for?" And I said, "This is the sportsmanship award." And she thought I was joking. She said, "No, really, what is it?" And it's a sportsmanship award. I won, and I was nice to everyone.
Turns out he was growing into a gentleman and out of his clothes. He'd been a puny kid, but he grew 9 inches in just 1 year, his junior year of high school.
He sprung up 9 inches, and suddenly he just wasn't the same player. I mean, his shots were much bigger, his serve was much bigger, the forehand was heavy, and before you know it, he started winning a lot of matches.
In fact, during his last 2 years of high school, he never lost a match, and he became the top player in America age 18 and under. At Harvard, during his sophomore year, he became the #1 college player in the country. Then he took a leave from Harvard, turned pro, and made it to number 22 in the national rankings before breaking his neck. But even that couldn't stop him for long. For just 6 weeks later, he began hitting tennis balls again. But then his dad's death sent him back to the hospital with yet another health catastrophe. Doctors say that losing his father was so tough for James that the stress triggered a severe viral infection, a debilitating case of shingles. It paralyzed half his face, reduced his hearing, blurred his sight, and more.
It affected my balance, so I would get up and feel real dizzy, like I was going to fall over. It affected my hearing. I lost 50% of my hearing in my left ear for a while. And my taste, everything tasted pretty gross to me at that time. And also just my whole left side of my face was paralyzed. My eye wasn't blinking, so I had to put drops in. It wasn't really closing. Only half of my face was working.
And then one of your best friends came into your hospital room, and suddenly he had you feeling a lot better about your sorry state?
He cracked up laughing and just started dying. He's like, I'm sorry, but you look ridiculous." And so, and it was perfect for me because I just started laughing. I'm like, you know what? I'm sure I do. I haven't really looked in the mirror, but I know I look stupid.
The facial paralysis could have been permanent, but James finally recovered, got out of the hospital, and back on the court.
What a shot by Blake!
He grabbed the national spotlight at this year's U.S. Open, and he played a thrilling 5-set match in the quarterfinals against his idol, Andre Agassi.
I told him afterwards I've never had so much fun losing a tennis match just because of the whole atmosphere, the crowd, playing a legend, someone I looked up to.
And his mother told us that at the peak of the match during the 5th set tiebreaker, James had a message for his dad.
He looked up and he said, "I love you, Dad."
I was thinking about how much he would have enjoyed being there. I think he would have been proud of the way I played, and that's actually what I was thinking about at that time.
Your mother told us that when a key point goes against you sometimes in a match, you think of your father. Why?
If I think of my dad, I realize it's not that big a deal, and it puts it into a better perspective, thinking what he went through without complaining. I shouldn't be complaining about one bad point, one shot and missed opportunity.
Your mother was white and British.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad was black and American.
Mm-hmm.
I read that back when you were in junior tennis, the father of another player said, "Hey, to you, I feel sorry for you because of your heritage. Both sides will hate you, blacks and whites."
Yeah, and my mom immediately said, I choose to look at it the other way. He could be loved by both sides, and that's what I wanted to think of it, too.
Your mother said that to you?
Yeah, I had a ton of white friends. I had a ton of black friends. I just thought, I have friends.
Many of his opponents are his friends, but not Leighton Hewitt, who made race an issue during a match with Blake 4 years ago. Hewitt complained that you were getting better calls from a linesman because the linesman and you were both black.
Yeah, and to me that seemed crazy.
Tell me what the similarity is.
For someone, a white player, to complain of racism seemed a little silly to me.
James just turned the other cheek, as Arthur Ashe might have done.
He just got a couple calls that he didn't think went his way, and it's unfortunate, but he fought through it and played great.
Because now Ashe is Blake's role model, and in his image, James hopes to be a role model for the next generation.
And I don't want them reading about me in the police blotter. I want them reading about me in the sports pages and possibly even some of the humanitarian efforts.
We caught up with James in Brussels, where he played on the U.S. Davis Cup team that beat Belgium. And his tennis continues to improve. So how good can he get? Here's what the #1 player in the U.S. thinks, his Davis Cup teammate Andy Roddick.
Could he be in the top 5 in the United States, do you think?
Well, I think he is top 5 in the United States right now.
Could he be in top?
I think James could be one of the top 10 players in the world, no question.
You do?
Yeah, I don't see a reason why not.
James had been known as the cool dude in the dreadlocks, but he tired of them and shaved his head. That shocked his agent, who told us that losing the dreads may have cost James $1 million in lost endorsement. Blake's triumph over tragedy, his reckless abandon on the court, and his resilient attitude off it have attracted legions of fans. At some tournaments, including this year's U.S. Open, dozens of James' longtime friends sit together in a rooting section they call the J Block.
You know, people wonder how many of those 40 or 50 or 60 people do you know? I'll tell you, I can tell you the life story of every one of those people in that J Block.
With all the pain and the heartbreak that you've gone through recently, what have you learned about life?
There's going to be ups and downs, and you gotta learn to roll with them. And when you're down, find a way to make the best of it. And that's what I tried to do last year when I was down, and I had the friends to make me do that. And now that I'm having some good times, some ups, my friends are there with me now, and I'm trying to make sure they're having just as much fun as I am.